Okay.
Okay, in the next video we are going to show you how to actually install the SpectraLine GP, which is a very good advanced gamma ray analysis software, which is different from the WinSpec. The WinSpec was used basically to set up my MCA, but after I've set up my MCA once, I should not need to come to this WinSpec software anymore. I will be operating everything from the SpectraLine GP software. The SpectraLine GP software should be supplied to you in the form of a CD, just like this. You can probably buy some additional options like Nuclide Master, Efficiency Maker, and a couple of other options, but the main file is called SpectraLine GP, and it is usually supplied in a CD like this, along or in a flash memory like this. And what is very important is, along with this software, you have a hard lock key, okay, which is a dongle and hard lock key. This hard lock key is based on the price that you have paid for the software, because the people who make the software, their entire intellectual capital is really the software. They have invested thousands of hours of programming time on the software. So they give you a license to operate this software in only one computer. So usually you buy a dongle for a single license, or for multiple licenses you buy multiple dongles. So this hard lock key allows you to run the SpectraLine GP software in the non-demo mode, which means it enables you to control an analyzer and do the full feature analysis as long as you have this dongle. Now I'm going to go through the process of installing the software. Again, you have a CD, and in my last video I told you that from the CD you should copy all the files to your desktop and create a desktop icon in here that will allow you to install the software from scratch. So here I have the SpectraLine GP software. All the contents of the CD has been saved in here, and I'm going to go ahead and start installing the software from the CD icons that I have. So what I usually do is I separate the SpectraLine software into a particular folder in my desktop, and then I will install it. Now I did get a copy of the main software here from the root file, and also there are a couple of other features that I will have to install in here, including a dongle driver, but I will start with the installation of the SpectraLine CD software. So what I usually do is I select the software, I run as an administrator, and then it will take you through the wizard, which will tell you that the SpectraLine software is going to be installed in the root directory called LSRM SpectraLine GP. And I recommend that even though you may have a preference not to install this software in the root directory, you go with it, because unless and until you become very familiar with the file structures of where all the data files and the configuration files used for energy calibration, efficiency calibration are stored, the SpectraLine GP software should be installed in the root directory in here as recommended by the wizard. So I will say yes, I will install it, and it goes through the installation process in here, and you are able to install it. Now if you close your installation window, you will now see that there is a shortcut icon has been created on the desktop if your installation has gone through, and if you click it open, it will come back and it will show you this screen for the icon. Now it will not work because I don't have the dongle installed, so it will only allow me, you can see that if I open the analyzer buttons in here, everything is whitened out. It's very important. Sometimes customers will call us and say, hey, I installed the software but I can't do anything. It doesn't let me control my analyzer. The reason it doesn't let you do anything because you don't have the dongle installed or the dongle driver installed in here. Now to use the dongle, I will have to install the dongle driver. So if you go into the SpectraLine CD software, you're going to see in here something called a dongle driver. And you have two drivers in here. One of them is a 64-bit driver for 64-bit computer, which I'm assuming most of new computers are 64-bit. And also you have a driver for a 32-bit computer, which is for a little bit older computers. I think this computer that we're using is a little bit older computer, even though it's running Windows 10. But one way to find out what you're running is to go in your start button in here, go to the control panel, and go into your system, and you can see in here what you're writing. It says, yes, you are running Windows 10 Professional, but you have a 32-bit operating system based on a 62-bit processor. So it's a 32-bit operating system, so my dongle driver should reflect that 32-bit operating system. So I'll go in here, I will go into, not the configuration files, go into the dongle drivers. I should install this one, right?
Yep.
Let me see what happens when I open this.
No.
It should be the 32-bit.
32.
Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and press right click, run as administrator, and I'm going to install the dongle driver. Now it's telling you welcome to the Guardian driver setup program. This is telling you the version number, which is 5.50.86. If you have a newer version already installed and you want to install an older version, normally it'll come and tell you that you have a newer version installed on it and you still want to override it. In my case, I don't have any versions installed here before, so I'm going to go ahead and accept the version that I'm installing. You just go through it and give it a few seconds. Sometimes it takes up to a minute to install the dongle driver. Again, this is the driver for this key in here. First I will install the software before I will insert the dongle. Now it's installed, and the best way to recognize whether my dongle driver is recognized is to take this dongle key and put it into my USB. And normally it will tell you that there is a device setup going on, and it will tell you that I'm installing the device. If there is an error and it's unable to install the dongle driver files, it will come and give you an error. We hope it won't give you an error. It will go back and install it and record the dongle drivers from the installation files we have done. But typically it might take up to a minute to go through this installation. Now it didn't give me any kind of error, which means that it's taken the installation to the dongle driver. Now if I go back in my SpectraLine software, you will see that once I have the dongle driver installed in here, one of the things we have to do is we have to load a configuration file, which is very important. So one of the first things we will do here is to go to File, we will go to Configuration Manager, and by default it might give you a dummy configuration file that is a default configuration file that you may or may not want to use, because we are going to supply you a configuration file with the CD that we are sending with the software. So I would delete it and I would load the configuration file applicable for my detector. My configuration file applicable for this detector, I believe, is located in, I have to make sure that I have located in my work directory, so I'm going to stop this here. I'll go outside, and my configuration file is located here. This detector is the GCD10175. This is the configuration file. I will copy this. I'm going to copy it, right click, copy, and I will go to my C drive. I will go under LSRM. I will go to work. Sorry, not SpectraLine, under work. And here I have the GP configuration file there. I'm going to go ahead and select under work this file also.
Yep.
Okay. Now I will go back to the open SpectraLine GP. Again, you do this once. By default is loading the 20% configuration file that I already had before. So I should go to the configuration manager. I should delete this file. I should go to load, and now you can see under the work directory, if you look at the directory structure, is C drive, LSRM, work. Under the work directory, I have the configuration file. This configuration file always comes under an extension of SCNF, which is the abbreviation configuration. And every detector has a unique configuration. So here it is LSRM CNF. Under my configuration folder for this particular detector, I will open that. And I will save it so that it goes to my configuration. Now you can see that my configuration has changed. Okay, for me now to be able to use this particular MCA, I have to actually tell the software and have the software recognize what MCA I'm working with. This one is a little bit tricky part. After I have loaded the configuration, I'm going to exit this software. I am going to open WinSpec for inspectors. I was just in that software when I set up my MCA, and I'm going to reset everything. And now that I have set up my MCA parameters already from a previous exercise of doing a setup, I will simply go to setup and I will read the setup file. And once you go to the setup file, it's usually the directory structure is a little bit difficult. I think the setup file is saved under data. Okay, it's under the root drive. It creates a folder called data. You can change it later. And if you recall, the setup file that we started working with was the MCA setup 104117, which we created this morning. We will open it. And as soon as you open it, you will see that it will tell you that it's going to turn on your high voltage, your preamplifier powers will show this particular, and it will tell you the inhibit signal is similar to the Canberra HPGE, which is similar to the NATS detector. So we'll say OK, and you will see that this icon will light up, which means the high voltage is now ramping up. It will tell you that it's ramping up slowly, and we wait till the high voltage ramps up as we load our setup file till we get all the, and you can see the readings in here. MCA 1084, high voltage is set at 1500 volts, battery 100%, stabilization is off. We are almost there now. As we load up the high voltage, give it a few seconds, it will bring up the setup spectrum that I had from my previous setup. What I can do is I can simply go in there and I can go to setup, leave the high voltage as is, simply disconnect this MCA from here. Okay, and if you want to make sure that you are actually acquiring, you can go in there and start a quick acquisition to make sure that you really have, you're getting real data. Yes, I'm getting real data. I will stop it. I don't have to save this spectrum. This is because this is just a junk. And then important is to leave the high voltage to the setup parameters that I have already set up. Go to file and disconnect this MCA from WinSpec. Because if you don't disconnect this MCA, you cannot control this MCA from the SpectraLine GP software. So we will disconnect the MCA. It will give you, tell you that the mini MCA has been disconnected. I will close this window. Say the spectrum is unsaved. You still want to exit? I said yes. And now I will go back to my SpectraLine GP software. And keep in mind, in the previous round, I had loaded my configuration file to the GCG 107.175 serial number so and so, which I did so earlier with the configuration manager, and I have no reason to change it now. But I will go into configuration properties. Again, I am going to repeat. I will go to the file. I will go to configuration properties. And if I select now any of these parameters, and if you are using our setup file, you should see a lot of these default numbers are showing up right now. But we will still go through and save, check all of these. So it's telling you this is the configuration file for the GCD 175 detector. This is a configuration file. Okay, you can make a comment in here. You can say our detector. Detector number 1. And then I can go to the MCA, and you can automatically see that it has recognized the GBS MCA 1084, and all the setup parameters here are read from the MCA files that we set up earlier with my lower level discriminator of 20, higher level of 16,380, and then the buffer size and the high voltage you can see is already set to 1500 volts, which means I don't need to change anything in here. Typically what I usually do is I save it. Okay, now I go through the detector properties. For the first time, your detector description file might be empty, but typically what we usually do is we give you a detector description file called an INI file, and that is located into, if you go back into your serial number in here, and if you go into data, you should find a detector pattern file. Is that the pattern file or the INI file?
CPT. Pattern.cpt.
Okay. We have not done an efficiency calculation, so just leave that alone right now. Spectrometer properties, calibrations is telling you that energy calibrations are actually, you have to have the file where the calibration parameters will be located. I emphasize that if you have this file highlighted in red, which means it is not finding the file that you have set up. So you may have to go in there and specify where this file is located. In our case, it is directly gone into the LSRM, work, GCD, data. This is our detector. If I go into data, it will by default come up to the energy calibration file with an extension of CEN. I can always select that and I can open it. It's already there. My full width half maximum calibration file, also the location is the same. You can see by default it's coming up. Spectrum processing parameters will tell you that it will ignore everything beyond the 90 channel number 90 on the left side, and on the right side the maximum channel is going to be 16300. This should automatically come up from your setup file that you saved, but sometimes if this number is wrong, then you have to make sure that you put it up to the number that you're interested in, which is the upper channel 16300. Left bound 7, right bound 7, zone markup method standard, maximum length in full width half maximum part 40. Sensitivity parameter, this is the sensitivity of the peak search, it's 5 by default. And if you have taken a background spectrum, then you can save the background spectrum and you can look at it here. For example, if you had a background spectrum collected, then we don't have a background, then we have an ABC point source background collected. Okay, do you want me to give that in here?
No.
Okay, because we have not collected a background. Fitting, background polynomial 1, full width half maximum, all these things are checked on. Application zone 100, and then it tells you the pattern file. This is where the pattern file comes.
Yes.
This pattern file is the pattern file from the data. It's here. Identification, it tells you that there is a library, and then you have to select the library file. In our case, in the data file, we have already provided you with the default library. If you go under this detector, if you go into data, you're going to see HPG calibration library. We can use this. File location, very important. The spectrum files are all going to be located in the directory which is under C, work, GCD, my detector name.
Data.
Okay, and I have to go back in here and I have to make sure that I select that. Now it's not the right place. So I have to go under GCD, I have to create data, and I have to say OK. Now you can see it's changed. Work directory file is also, just to be sure, LSRM, this particular data. Scenario files is going to be again under LSRM, this particular detector under scenario. Etalon file is the file that we call is the certificate file used for calibrating your. It has a default certificate file called bsi.src, and we just have to specify where it's pointing, because we will create our own Etalon file, our own certificate file. Again, it's under our data directory in here, and then we can select that as a default. You have to have some files in here to begin with, otherwise you will give you an error. And then the report file also tells you that it's under data, this data, and the report file has an extension of FR3. Open. Now we go to primary calibration. We select by moments, by full width moments, plugins, none, activity calculation. Once we do the detector efficiency calculation, we can create the activity calculations in here. If you are going to do dose metrics, you can select files in here. Data representation, just leave it as default, and make sure you save these, because if you don't save it, it will default back to whatever it was there. You save it. Once you save it, you can close it, and now we can go back. Our dongle is inserted in here, so we are not in the demo mode. Our spectrum file has been loaded. We have gone in there, and the configuration properties, we have seen the MCA has been identified. High voltage is set up at 1500 volts. We can OK. And now we can go ahead and open the analyzer. First time when you open the analyzer, there will be the data that we collected when we did the setup, because this data is coming from the buffer of this MCA. So one of the first things I will do, I will go here, I will go to analyzer and I will clear. Now there are some shortcuts here to clear, but you will learn the shortcuts later. I prefer not to use the shortcuts when I have the option of going to these pull down menus. Now I can go in there and I can start counting by going to the analyzer. I can say start, and now it's telling you the sample name is ABC. I will say test 1 0 4 1 0 1 17. Measuring type, I'm going to say that I'm going to measure a disk source. So from here I can select the measuring type. How we are going to measure a calibration spectrum, and we are going to do a calibration on it. So we are going to measure the calibration spectrum, and my detector file, I can select which detector. Here it is all default showing up. This is my GCD 10175, and then you can put additional sample information in here. If you have sample in mass, grams and uncertainty, you can put it in here. For the sake of our work, it's a disk source. We don't have any mass issue involved. We can say OK. And now it's telling you what the acquisition time should be. The acquisition time is 300 seconds. If you are going to do a calibration spectrum, it should be a little bit longer. So we are going to do a 600 second count. And we're going to do an on lifetime mode. And we're going to say OK. Once you do that, you should start to see your data start to come up. And again, we are doing a calibration spectrum that you can see from our previous video. It has a cadmium, cesium and 2 cobalt peaks. And this is probably the sum peak from the 2 cobalt peaks, because my sample is sitting fairly close to the end cap of the detector. But I still like to keep my sum peak in here to see. This is approximately 2500 keV line that I can see to see the upper end of my nuclide range, and the lower end is around 88 keV from cadmium 109. I'm going to let it count right now for 600 seconds, and after that we're going to go through a peak search. We're going to save it, and then we're going to go through energy calibration, shape calibration and efficiency calibration. You can stop here.